I was born in Belzoni, Mississippi. I came to Toledo in 1946. So I've been here a long time.
What brought you to Toledo?
I came to visit my sister after World War II. I was really looking for a job in Chicago, but I came over to visit her because of a holiday. I was not able to look for work in Chicago, so I came over to spend a weekend with her. And friends of hers asked me to look for a job in Toledo for 3 days. On the third day, I found a job working construction, and I've been here ever since. I started interested in law back in the 1930s. So when I actually finished high school, I already had in mind to be a lawyer. When I first started practicing law, number one, of course, there were fewer lawyers. We knew each other very well, and they were mostly clustered in the Spitzer building, the Gardner building, I would say National Bank building, and then at that time the security building, which is right across the street. So, and there were a few in the Ohio Citizens building, the two. At that time, Fuller and Henry was the big law firm there in that building. So primarily on Madison Avenue, you found most of the lawyers. In the old days, there was one man that came around and sold carbon paper. Everything had to be typed on a typewriter, and if you made a mistake, you had to go back and correct each one of those carbon copies. So the carbon copies were frequently used because you had a lot of copies. That business is out completely because you can make copies very easily on a machine. Then in about the 1980s, a man sold me an electronic typewriter. He said, this typewriter is going to put me out of business because before you clean your typewriters every month. And the man came by and cleaned your typewriters and so forth. He said, this has so few moving parts, you don't need me anymore. And it was true that the electronic typewriter, you typed it, you also could print it out. It was connected with the computer. So he sold me an instrument, and he told me it's going to put him out of business. And of course, you know that the copy machine itself has come in, and the corrections you can make on computers is tremendous and that type of thing. And to some extent, it's eliminated people, because I can remember going to one of the big law firms in the National Bank building. I think it was Spengler Nathanson. They had a whole room of nothing, just secretaries, just typing. Today, a lot of that has been eliminated because of the fact that many times the lawyer himself has access to a copy machine and access to a computer, and even walking down the street. And I recall one of the lawyers told me one day, he said, Eddie, you know one thing? He said, when I go to the bank, he said, I can get my phone calls, even though they come to the office, I can transfer them to my phone, and I'm in the bank or wherever I'm going, and I can answer my phone. So that's all changed quite a bit. Formerly, you would go out and you come back, your secretary would hand you a stack of notes, people who called and all like that. Today, they say, wait a minute, let me give you his voicemail. So you tell him directly what you want and that type of thing. And frequently, he can pick up his voicemail from a distant place. That too. I recall that one of the very large cases I was able to settle, I was in Memphis, and I settled the case over the telephone. But also, when I would go out of town and be on a cruise or something of that sort, I could call back with a telephone to my office and be able to talk with my secretary and that type of thing. Now, it would cost you $15 a minute, but if you had something important to say, you had to say it. But that has changed tremendously. And now, the last time I was in one of the countries, I could call directly from my cell phone, directly without going through the various channels and being connected and so forth. Quite frequently, when you go out of town, you take some of your matters with you that you look over and be prepared when you come back. But frequently, I went to Acapulco in the spring after my wife retired from the public schools. We would take a winter vacation. And frequently it would be during the same time that the college kids would have their spring break. And we would go to Acapulco. And I recall taking some work with me because it's been a week. And I would prepare sometime, I remember preparing a criminal case in federal court, particularly that was going to be rather long and tiring. It was a bank robbery case in which they robbed the bank somewhere in not Lucas County, a different county, but the bank was owned by a United States congressman's family. And we wanted to be sure that if my client was guilty, to own up to it. If not, let me know. He insisted that he did not do it. He was not there, although he had just gotten out of prison 6 months earlier for a similar type thing. But we took depositions. We went out and visited people. And, of course, eventually we had to go to trial. He was found guilty, of course. But it was very interesting. Things come out that people in prison also plan the next event that they're going to do. That people in prison communicate with one another and they come out with a plan. They don't come out with empty-handed. They come out with a plan. So you have to be very careful in the whole judicial system that you break the cycle. I like the civil rights idea of helping the poor people, helping to end segregation and so forth. I was vice president of the NAACP in Toledo, and we helped to get blacks into an apprenticeship training program back in '63. And Toledo Board of Education had a system of assigning black teachers only to schools where the majority of students were black. Although there were vacancies in other schools, they were just restricted to only schools where there were a majority or a certain percentage were black. We were able to stop that through the NAACP filing what is called an administrative complaint back about 1978. Then I was a hearing officer for the Ohio Civil Rights Commission back after from 75 to 85, something like that. And I had an opportunity to hear directly cases involving that type of thing. Okay.
So that's kind of what gave you that's what you enjoyed.
Yeah, I enjoyed doing
cool.
that.
Yeah.
But I enjoyed probate work too as well, because you get an opportunity to see how people accumulated not only their wealth, but also accumulated and worked for their families, and how they were able to pass it on, and how they left a legacy of some sort through how they gave their property and that type of thing. It was interesting in that too. And to see people who have a very little income but are very influential in the community because of their service. They gave a lot of themselves to various causes, not because they had a lot of money, but because they gave so much time to that type of thing.
it seemed like Mr. Boyk thinks that of you. He thinks that of you, that you've always given of yourself, and you've really made an effort to help the community. So I think that's one of the reasons he wanted to interview you, because he sees that in you.
Well, I try to do that, yes. I taught Sunday school for 39 years, ended in 1991. And I was secretary of the trustee board of my church, Brayton United Methodist Church, for 41 years, ended in 1991. So I'm presently the secretary of the men's group, the United Methodist Men, and program chairman. And I've been secretary and program chairman for a long time in that. We have our monthly meetings, to have speakers come out. I still type the minutes and present them. I enjoy doing that too. And I'm a member of the Neighborhood Health Association Board of Directors. And we are building a new facility at the corner of 14th Street and I believe it's Jefferson, the former Cadillac place, the Pemberton Cadillac, Taylor Cadillac. And that facility we hope to break ground sometime this year, later on. And so we've been working with that, and they have 8 facilities already in operation. They plan to consolidate some of those and operate there. That's important too, right?
Yeah, that's awesome.
We met weekly, Toledo Bar Association, at first in the Elks Lodge, which is now where the Family Court Center is located. And the Lucas County Bar also met every Monday, or at least once a week. So we were meeting frequently with each other. There were docket calls in which you had to be present in the municipal court every day at 1:30 to to either get a default judgment or to sometime try your case at 1:30. In the family court, there was also a docket call on Thursdays that you had to be present on your motions and so forth. So you had a lot of interaction with each other personally. And most lawyers at that time filed their individual papers themselves. There were very few runners. Some of the large law firms had college students to run papers for them, but most lawyers filed their own papers. So we would walk together to court and talk as we walked, settle cases and that type of thing. Of course, there were telephones, but at that time there were no cell phones, of course, that you could do that. And it was very helpful, and you made friendships too. Very important. That was one of the things that happened. There was, and still is a lot of camaraderie with lawyers, but you do miss that, the lunches together, the frequent lunches together. Well, when I moved to Toledo, the first thing, of course, was to consolidate the family, because my mother was still in Mississippi, so we bought a home on the GI Bill of Rights that we still own today. And my mother came and joined us and lived together. Basically, you walked everywhere and rode the bus. Basically, the Douglas Center, the Frederick Douglass Community Association, was where a lot of activities took place, and the Indiana YMCA. The Douglas Center had a basketball facility, and as well as the YMCA, but the Douglas Center had, I'd say, the more professional ball players rather than young ball players. Some had played with the Harlem Globetrotters, and they were back playing at the Douglas Center after their regular work hours. And as I would leave the law school and stop by at night, I would see them play, and I said, they must be very good. And later on, I learned that several of them had played with the Harlem Globetrotters. They were excellent players. And I enjoyed watching that. And the Delegate Center had discussions over the weekend dealing with employment, like we talk about today, your interviews and so forth. And I joined what is called Kappa Alpha Psi Fraternity, one of the college fraternities, and we also participated in not only fun for ourselves, but for community and banquets and so forth. And at that time, one of our fraternity brothers, J.B. Simmons Jr., was the first black city councilman. We gave a banquet for him, and it was very interesting that how the community turned out to support him in that respect. Yes.
Where was the center located?
Was that?
Where was the center located?
At that time, it was 201 Pinewood, the corner of Pinewood and I would say the cross street would be 12th Street, something of that sort. Now there's a bumper manufacturing company is located there, right at the expressway as you go into I-75 going west. But it was very nice facility. It had been purchased in 1919 or something of that sort. And the city had built, in addition to it, a gym during the Depression under the WPA program. And that was what it was used for.
Where was the house that you purchased? What area of Toledo was the house that you purchased when you moved here?
Which one's now?
Where's the area? Where did the house that you purchased?
Yeah.
Where was that?
At Fernwood and Lawrence Avenue, Fernwood, 800 block Fernwood. On Lawrence Avenue, if you would think in terms of Smith Park or the Martin Luther King School, right across the street from that, right? And in those days we had, in that particular block, there were there were 4 lawyers that eventually grew up out of that block alone. One became a U.S. attorney. One went with, I believe it was Orange, Illinois, glass company as an attorney and moved to Atlanta. One is a magistrate in the courts, I think it's juvenile court. And then we have one member who's a member of city council today. She's a woman, my former secretary, Teresa Gabriel. So in that block you had a lot of people who had ambition and is well kept and so forth. Now, over the years things have changed, of course. In the block ahead we had police officers, Officer Gordon. We had men who worked for, I believe at that time, the city infrastructure, people who worked at the Sal and Cook, which is a big retail company. So you had a lot of people who were trying to do things, that type of thing. So it was very interesting, and you intermingle with people a lot. And a lot of in that area, you also had this a store on every corner. I mean, you had small shopping centers within the block, where you would have a store on each one of the corners. At Norwood and Lawrence, you have a grocery store, you had a pharmacy on one corner, you have a service station, and you have another grocery store and a barber shop and all like that. So you really had a small shopping center in your area. Very interesting.
That is cool. So that would make you obviously get to know your neighbors so much more since you were always going to the same places.
Right.
That's neat. What's the major difference you see between Toledo now and Toledo when you moved here? What strikes you as?
Well, Toledo, when I first came to Toledo, as I recall, Saturdays was a big day. Downtown was crowded. People came downtown to pay their bills in cash. I recall on Saturday, as I worked as a law student in the office of Heslop and Gibson, just as a student volunteer, they were my mentors. The parades and everything came downtown. All the parades, when they get ready for football games, they paraded downtown. Downtown was bustling. The buses at that time, they were streetcars, mostly streetcars. Today, downtown is not quite that bustling. Adams Street was a real busy street. People came downtown and bought clothes, had them changed on. Tickets were very, very important on Summit Street. All downtown was just full of people. Over the years, when they, in the early 1950s, when they built Westgate Shopping Center, the downtown began to shift because the people say, why dress up and go downtown? I can go right to the shopping center. And so they went to Westgate. Westgate was the shopping center. So as eventually LaSalle's had gone down and had to be closed. Lampson's went down. It was closed. And when those two large ones, the line store, of course, followed that time. So you consequently, you had no big drawing downtown for shoppers. They tried to revamp the downtown and cut it off for parking and so forth, but people didn't. It did for a while, but it didn't really help. So one of the things that happened to the neighborhoods, however, the neighborhoods still held up. But as they built more homes out in the outer area, people moved out to the outer area and they left the central city vacant. So there are a lot of vacant homes in the inner city. I would say, as you go by, and in the block you'll find, out of 10 homes in a block, you will find 3 or 4 of them more just vacant. Just need somebody in them, that's all. And of course the city is overwhelmed with weeds and trying to pave streets and so forth when naturally the revenue is down because the people have moved out. Although they may be still in the city, but many of the better paid ones are outside the city limits. So that's one of the things that happened. It happened in Toledo, Detroit. When I go to Memphis, it's happened in Memphis as well, and that type of thing. Yeah.
If you could bring anything back from old Toledo, what would you bring back?
I would bring back the neighborhoods. I think the neighborhoods is the foundation for the families. Where you learn from neighbors. You learn from neighbors. Some of my neighbors have been here they were here when I moved here, and that was in 1962. So they were here when I was here. So my next door neighbor has been here a long time. And you make friendships, and your families grow up together and that type of thing. And that's very important. It happens all over the world, but it should go back to Toledo. And the homes that we see that are vacant, there should be new homes built in those places and restock it. Now there's a way to do it. It's by immigration. But people, the national government is not together on that, okay? But there would be people who are willing to come and do a job, maintain the homes, but the powers and structure at this point have not realized that.
Can you tell me a little bit about your family?
Well, Well, my daughter is works at the University of Arkansas. She is the director of, I think it's called diversity, and at the J. William Fulbright College of Arts and Sciences at the University of Arkansas. Just received her PhD in June. That's in May 10th. I was able to go there and visit with them. My son works in Detroit. He's in real estate. And my grandson, who just finished high school in Arkansas, he just moved into the dormitories as a freshman at the University of Arkansas. And I have another grandson. His brother should be a junior in high school. And I have a granddaughter, my son's daughter, who is now, I think, 8 years old. So she's there. My sister died in 2013 at the age of 94. So she lived a long time, and she was very active in church, sang in the choir for a number of years, and she worked for the U.S. government for 27 years. And lastly, Defense Electronics in Dayton, Ohio, connected with Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. My wife, who died in 2007, was an administrator and served as principal of Ottawa River Elementary School before she retired in 1990, but served 35 years as a teacher and administrator with the Board of Education. And my mother, who came here in 1946, after I came, she basically was a housekeeper for me and my sister, but she was very active in the church as she was a communion steward, and she also worked as what's called the missions treasurer at the time. But prior to coming to Toledo, she worked day work, and she also had her own washing and ironing business at home. And I helped her with that when I was at home. And my sister, before she came to Toledo, went to what is called Poro Business College, and she was a hairdresser, a beautician. But she came to Toledo, and of course she worked for Jeep Corporation during World War II. And as a young man, or should say, I went into military service in 1943 and served until 46. And I served at Fort Leonard Wood, Missouri, Fort Benning, Georgia, Fort Belvoir, Virginia, New Guinea, the Philippines, and in the occupation of Japan. Discharged in 1946. I obtained the rank of a sergeant, and when I got out. And prior to that, I went to Tougaloo College, Tougaloo, Mississippi, where I won a scholarship in 1940 after I graduated from high school as the valedictorian of my class at that year, in 1940. And from 34 to 40, I worked at grocery store as a baggage handler, Piggly Wiggly, Clarence Sanders, and so forth. And prior to that, of course, up to 14, I was just a kid at home and that type of thing. Okay.
Was it hard being a child during that time period? I mean, the country
well,
was
it
going
was.
through a lot of them.
I enjoyed it. Again, and you always had a lot of friends in the neighborhood, and people they understood that they were poor. We all understood we were poor, but you most of the time you were laughing, and most of the time you were having fun and playing ball and that type of thing. But you understood that times were hard. Everybody understood that. nothing like Santa Claus in the 1920s was brought you everything. But Santa Claus in the 1930s was very, very, things were very smaller. They didn't keep going up, they went down. But that was all right, they understood that. And people gathered around what is called the WPA, and they worked at that, and they built things, they built dams, water dams. And in Toledo, they built the University of Toledo, main building. They built Anthem Wayne Trail. But I wasn't here, but those things they were doing here. But in Mississippi, they were building dams to try to keep the water back and that type of thing. Okay? But everybody understood that times were tough. But that didn't stop the fun. And as we were in high school, we would listen to the radio, music coming from Chicago, out of the ballroom, and you would hear bands like Count Basie, Duke Ellington, the same music that everybody heard, you heard there too. And you had that type of thing to look forward. They had, when Joe Louis turned pro in 1934 and started fighting, they would broadcast those fights. And at the grocery store, and at the end of the fights of broadcasting, they would quarter off the street corners. And under supervision, they would have all of us who wanted to box to put on boxing gloves and start boxing. And I would be participating in that. And they would they'd take a watermelon and divide it in half. And whether you won or lost, your side got a half a watermelon. And you had a lot of fun. And you boxed in those things, and you learned to have fun. You won in Chicago, but you were doing the same type of thing, right?
Was there anything else that you want to mention or that you can think of that's important to share?
No, I think that over the years that Toledo has been a very good place to live, to raise children and to family. And I've seen that to a great extent, things have improved tremendously. And Toledo has shared in that. There are things they need to do, like we had the problem with the water and that type of things. They made some mistakes. They can be corrected, and I think that basically Toledo can rebound, Maybe not to the height it was, not to the number of people, but to better take care of some of the things they can do. And I think they will do. And they're working up and down Door Street to make it safer and easier to travel. University of Toledo has expanded tremendously across the street. And I think that things are looking up. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for taking the time to do this. It was so wonderful. It was so nice to hear your story.
All right.
So great.